Welcome, denizens of the night, to Fangs After Dark. Tonight, I wanted to cover the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 Dev Diary number 15. Now, I haven't really covered any Dev Diaries in the past for this game, but I wanted to cover this one because it had to specifically deal with dialogue choices, and this was a very big sticking point for a lot of fans and potential players and people just interested in this game as to how is dialogue going to work. Is it going to be like Fallout 4? Is it going to be like Baldur's Gate? Well, in this Dev Diary, they go into a little bit of what they decided to do with their dialogue choice system and how it's going to work. And I thought it was interesting enough that I wanted to do a little video covering what the Dev Diary states. So, without further ado, here it is. So, let's get into it. To start off, they talk about the philosophy of their dialogue design choice. It seems like the Chinese Room opted for a design that fully realizes the characterization of the characters' choices while allowing the voice actors to have a lot more leverage on how they present those dialogue choices in the context of the game. They acknowledge the fact that having dialogue choices that are too simplistic in their presentation can leave a lot of flavor at the door, and the Chinese Room wants the voice actors to really emphasize the character's motivations and personality when you make a dialogue choice. They acknowledge the fact that more simplistic dialogue choice systems like what you see in Fallout 4, where it's something along the lines of, the good, normal response, the bad, evil response, or the neutral, chaotic response, or whatever, and in some cases, the more simplified choices that they had showcased before, such as when they showcased Fire having dialogue choices of tell her everything, keep things close to your chest, things like that. They have opted to find like a middle ground, essentially. They understand that the players, they've stated in this Dev Diary, they understand that the players have to have full comprehension of what they're getting themselves into, but they also want to be able to have the nuance of personification through the voice actors to keep things immersive. This is a dark world. This is a world of darkness, and they don't want things to fall too flat. They don't want players to fall into the trap of picking a dialogue option that has a very generalized presentation to the player, and then the character goes off on some sort of tirade or emotional outburst that they were not expecting and they did not want. Such as an example would be, let's say you are speaking to an NPC and one of the dialogues options, the simple ones would be, tell her that you don't have the ability to perform this task. And then you do so, but then you realize that when you tell her that, your character decides that this is the moment she's going to be an angry piece of shit and cause a problem later down the line, which is not something that you wanted, because the dialogue choice that you saw presented to you as a player was not clear enough. They want to avoid that, but they also want to lean more towards characters being able to say more than what's presented on screen. Obviously, they can't have big paragraphs of dialogue choices presented to everybody because then it can be a little overwhelming. So what they're saying is that they're trying to find a good middle ground where you will have a good summarization of what the dialogue choice is going to represent and what it's going to mean, but you're also going to have some nice flavor of dialogue coming from the characters that isn't necessarily shown on the screen. This way, you also let the voice actors kind of flare things up, and as a player, you can enjoy the fact that you're going to pick a dialogue option. You are reasonably sure that this is what you want. You can tell by the option that they're presenting that your character is going to have this temperament, the tone that you know she'll have. And this is what they're stating that they're going to do, and hopefully that is the case. They've also touched on the themes of the dialogue system that they're putting into place. They talk about how every game that has this kind of dialogue system will have some sort of theme that they go for, such as Baldur's Gate Their dialogue system is loosely based off of the typical D&D alignment system, neutral good, lawful good, chaotic evil, etc. And games like Telltale's The Walking Dead, a lot of their dialogue choices stem around, do you have to be cruel to survive? And a lot of the dialogue choices that lead to your character's actions revolve around that theme. They are taking that same approach to the dialogue system for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, in which they are applying the strategy versus humanity theme. Will this choice get me what I want, but also preserve my humanity? And as an elder, you might think that maybe that's not even something you should worry about. You're an elder, your humanity should already be kind of eroded and gone. But at the same time, you also have to realize that as a vampire, your humanity is a very big role in your ability to maintain yourself, especially if you are going to be in, civilized vampire society. The Camarilla, the Anarchs, things of that nature. One could make an argument for the Sabbat, but we all know that that's not something that's going to really be represented all that much. So in the context of a more civilized, masquerade type of vampiric society, humanity plays a larger role. And of course, it seems like they're going to give you the choice to be able to make dialogue choices that eschew your humanity, that I don't care if my humanity is in threat, I'm going to do this because it's going to get me what I want. You're going to play that stone cold, hard, stoic, callous, typical elder that you might think, right? So they said that that's the theme that they're really going for. And then something else that they mentioned that I thought was also extremely interesting is the fact that the dialogue choices you make throughout the game are going to be kind of like building blocks on the relationships you have with NPCs. And they're going to have a kind of like a compass of your personality based on the consistency of your choices in the game. So let's say you start off at the beginning of the game and you interact with Lou, and you start off your interaction with Lou as a hard ass, an aggressive person, somebody who's a little volatile and very direct. In other words, you act like an asshole. And then later on down the line, let's say halfway through the game, you interact with Lou again, and then you just all of a sudden gave her a dialogue choice that makes you seem to be more empathetic and more nice and caring. Instead of her taking that favorably, because vampires are conniving creatures, she's going to take that as you being sarcastic because you haven't been acting that way consistently towards her throughout the game. You are an asshole, and then all of a sudden you're nice. She's going to be thinking that, well, you're being a sarcastic asshole. And that's something that I find to be very interesting. And it is also vice versa. If you have been, if you've been nice and direct and respectful, and then all of a sudden you have a scene where you kind of lose your temper, she might take that as a more favorable thing, like, oh wow, I didn't realize this hurt you so much. Or she might see you as very earnest, so she takes you at your word more often because that's what you've been presenting to her. And it seems, based on the dev diary, that this level of living dialogue and emotional connection is going to be for every NPC in the game, which I think is going to be extremely interesting if this is true. And I really hope it is, because that sounds really fun, honestly. Having to figure out what makes NPCs tick throughout the game so that you can make the right choices when talking to them, so you can get the leverage you want from specific people depending on what route you want to take in the game, sounds extremely fun and interesting as well, which is what they touted in the dev diary. A lot of the decisions are left up to the interpretation of the NPCs based on their pre-programmed biases and likes and dislikes and the player itself. So according to what they've put in the dev diary, you as the player are going to have to kind of figure out you're going to develop your emotional intelligence on the NPCs that you're interacting with to see who you're going to kind of butter up, who you're going to make an enemy. And that sounds very nuanced. And I'm very interested interested to see exactly how that's going to play out, because with that level of nuance, with that level of social interaction in a game, you would think that there would be a lot of different outcomes. And in my opinion, it sounds, from what they're writing, it sounds a little too good to be true, because it seems very, very awesome, right? And as a dev diary showcasing the ups of the game, they want people to think positively of things. And I'm not a stranger to understanding these kinds of marketing tactics. They are obviously going out of their way to do dev diaries instead of having gameplay footage, which, to be fair, I understand that gameplay footage for dialogue options is not going to be that useful, because for a player to really grasp the entire context of dialogue options and the consequences of those options, you have to play the game throughout a whole story to see how that works out. And they're obviously not going to put out, gameplay footage for such things, because that would spoil too much. So at the end of the day, it's really just left up to how is it going to play out when the game is actually being played, and the only way to do that is to buy the game and play it. And I know a lot of people already have a negative disposition on this game. The fact that they're putting out dev diaries instead of gameplay footage doesn't sit well with a lot of people. The last time we got anything was back in January when it came to gameplay footage, which I feel is a very large gap without seeing any gameplay footage at all. I agree that there should have already been something out. But this dev diary definitely, it definitely sounds like an interesting dialogue system that they're putting in there, and I want to see how it plays out. It could end up playing out very poorly. You could end up having a situation where you have all of this nuance and whatnot, but it really doesn't culminate to that many different outcomes, especially since they stated that there's going to be a lot of clan influence as well. So is it going to be that nuanced? Because if it is, and it does play out really good, it could end up being extremely immersive, and that's what a lot of us want, right? We want an immersive Vampire the Masquerade experience. And this dialogue system definitely seems like it's promising to give us that based on this dev diary. So does it make me a little excited? Yeah, a little bit. But I'm also very self-aware in the fact that this is a dev diary. This is put out by the company. Obviously, it's geared and marketed towards making it sound really awesome. So we won't know until the game really comes out. And if you read the dev diary yourself, they have like little snippets and stuff of how, like a little dialogue tree of how it would end up working. So I encourage you to kind of read the dev diary yourself and look at it and see what they have presented. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. So I'm a little bit hopeful of this, and I guess we'll see. Hopefully they put out more gameplay footage. I would definitely like to see more gameplay footage. I know a lot of us would, but their dialogue system, dev diary, definitely has me a little bit more excited. It's definitely piqued my interest on the positive end. So. And I want to try to keep things positive, because there's enough negativity in the world when it comes to pretty much everything that, I like to highlight some of the good stuff. But I am also very much in the opinion of hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And with that, I will leave you guys with those thoughts. And I'll see you in the next video. And remember, nothing good ever happens after dark.